So I have 10 books to talk to you about, talk to you about. I always say that weird. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my surprising reads of the year. So this is one of my favorite end of the year videos to do, and that is just because I love looking back on all the books that surprised me for whatever reason, whether it wasn't I wasn't expecting it, whether the hype was really high and I thought that it wasn't going to be as good because of the hype, or for another reason. I love looking at the books that really just hit me at the right time or whatever it was. So today we have 10 books to talk about. I narrowed it down to just 10. I could have kept going, honestly. But these are the ones that I would say were the most surprising and that stuck out in my brain. So the very first one, there's no order, but I'm doing this one first because it's the only one I don't physically have right now, and that is because my copy has been lent out to some friends, and that is The No-Show by Beth O'Leary. This is one that I have literally not shut up about since I read it, and I don't even remember when it was, probably August, September, somewhere in there, and I am obsessed. This one follows 3 women as from their perspectives, and they all are dating this guy named Joseph Carter, and they all get stood up on Valentine's Day by him. And so it's the 3 of them and their respective romances with this guy. And it sounds so bad. Usually if cheating is involved in a book, I'm like, peace out, goodbye. But there is a couple of twists in this book that really brought it home, and one of my favorite things is the girl I work with, I gave her this book. She's not a huge reader, and I gave this book to her in the hopes that she would enjoy it, and she described it in a really cool way of the author has a fantastic way of making you care for each of these relationships, even though the idea of this book is so ridiculous with this guy going on dates with 3 different women, but then the twist at the end makes it all worth it. And that was really it for me, was I fell in love with these characters. Just like she said, you're reading this book and you want the best for all 3 of these women. And all 3 of these women cannot be with the same guy. And so it's really hard for you as the reader to really have grown attached to these characters. And Carter himself, he is really good at making you like him. And so you're just reading this book and it's fantastic. And then there's, like I said, a couple of plot twists near the end that I did not see coming at all. And they really made the story perfect and beautiful. And I've never read anything by Beth O'Leary until this book, and now I own 3 of her books at least. And I just want to keep reading things by her because she has this beautiful way of writing romances with a very important and a little bit deeper of a topic. I would say she's similar to Emily Henry in that way of their romances, but there's other stuff going on with it. And I really enjoyed that with this book. It was really, those plot twists really just took my mind in 3 different dimensions, and I didn't know what to expect, and I ended up falling head over heels for this book. I haven't sat down and actually planned out my best books of the year yet, but I would be very surprised if this did make it on there. Okay, moving on to the ones that I actually own. The next one is Hitched, a Gunslinger by Michelle McLean. This is a Western book that follows our 2 main characters. We have Gray Woodson, or he's known as Gray Quickshot Woodson, and our female lead, Mercy. And so Gray is a gunslinger. He just kind of got forced into this trade, if you will, without really planning on it. Basically, he just wants to retire. He's done with the gunslinger game. He's just I want my little house in the wilderness and to sleep all day and be left alone. And so at the very beginning of this book, he finds this town called Desolation, which is a place that is literally in the middle of nowhere. You literally can only find it if you're looking for it, and no one knows it exists. So you quite almost literally stumble across it. And so he does that, and it's a place where people come to find refuge. They're all escaping something in one way or the other, but it's a town of misfits. And so he gets to this town and he runs into this woman named Mercy. But Mercy is dealing with a lot because her father has just passed away, leaving his land to her. There's an apple orchard on it, and that's how she makes her money. And there's this guy in the town who is trying to buy the land, and he's tried everything. He's tried to sell it, like basically buy it from her, given her offers that she can't refuse, offered to marry her, and she keeps telling him no. And so she stumbles upon Gray, or Gray stumbles upon them when they're having an argument, and basically she tells everyone, oh, this is Gray Quickshot. Don't you know who that is? He's my fiance. And there's like this fake engagement of sorts, and it's their romance. The biggest reason why this surprised me is that I do not like Westerns. The idea of like Western romances, I'm a huge fan of Hallmark movies. I don't know if you guys could tell that by everything about me. But when it comes to like small town ranch style romances, more of a Western feel, I usually like steer clear of that kind of stuff. I just have never been interested in that. And I read this book because my friend got it because she likes the cover. She also doesn't like Westerns. And we both read it together, and we're both so shocked by how amazing the story was. The banter between these characters was fantastic. I believed every second of this romance. There was one little bitty thing at the very end that I was like, did you need to throw that in? But otherwise, it was just straight up beautiful, and I didn't think I was gonna like it because of the Western vibe. So this author is making me rethink that a little bit, and now I have a few other Westerns in the back of my brain of like, okay, maybe it's worth trying those. But this one really started it all. I adored it. I will not shut up about it. This one surprised me so much. The next one that got a big surprise from me is Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. This is the first in a new trilogy by this author. And the idea behind this book is that it takes place in England, or like the UK, and there is this coven of witches, and it's called the HMRC, and they basically govern the witch body of the UK. And there's actually something in the UK called the HMRC. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's basically their tax department. And so the mundanes, the mortals, whatever you want to call them, the humans that don't have magical powers, they look on this department and just assume it's taxes and like don't think twice about it, when it's actually basically like a giant ministry within the government, specifically for people with magical powers, specifically women. The women in this society are much more powerful than the men. And the book kicks off with these 4 women who have they kind of grew up together, and they've all kind of separated throughout their lives. And one of them has become the priestess of the HMRC, and one of them has just become like a normal mom. She just doesn't want to have to do anything with, witches and stuff. One of them kind of separates and creates her own little baby coven that's basically for POC people. And then we've got our other one, like our other 2 main characters are the priestess and then Leonie. And Leonie used to train witches and has basically taken a step back, and she is a vet. And so in this book, it really starts with the priestess coming to her and being like, there's been this vision of like this really evil, bad force called Leviathan. It's one of like the 3 big bad things. She thinks, the high priestess thinks it's this young kid. And so Leonie comes to hopefully talk to this kid and ends up taking this kid under her wing to teach. This is such a weird book to talk about because at the beginning of this book, this kid transitions throughout the course of this book. They really come into their own and figure out that they are actually female. And so you have this issue. That's really where the issue comes in with this book, is you've got the high priestess who cannot see that. She's like, no, this individual was born male, therefore they are male and cannot be part of the coven. And Leonie is like, this girl, this individual, this child has basically the most powerful child that I have seen in a very, very long time, and they identify as female. We should let them in the coven. And there's a lot of backlash with that. So that was a really long explanation to tell you that this book was great and it's about witches. So the biggest thing why this book surprised me is I wasn't really sure what I was getting into. I thought it was going to be fun, witchy vibes, which it does have that for sure. I don't know if I just didn't read the back fully or if I just didn't know, but I didn't know there was going to be this big conversation about trans rights within this community. And that's what surprised me, was the ability to have this conversation in a very interesting, mythical, magical kind of setting, and have this conversation that is happening in our community today happen in this book, and give it such attention and conversation, and really seeing both sides to the story, while also, I don't know how to explain it. It was very, very well done. I will say, just for reference, the author herself is trans, so I would assume it comes from a relatively real place as far as own voices and stuff like that, but the conversations that were had in here were so fascinating, and you really feel for these characters, and I cannot wait to see where it goes, because not only do you have these very interesting and deep conversations, but the plot and the world building that this author had to do was incredible, because there is a fantastic plot. There is a fantastical plot going on underlying under all of this political conversation. And it's so strong itself. Like, the conversation is so strong, and you can tell that that is what the author was trying to do. But there's also this plot line that is equally as strong, and I can't wait to see what she does in the second book. But I didn't expect these conversations to be had in this book. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. And I was so surprised when those were the conversations we had, but it was done just so beautifully. The next one is the first in a series by Nora Roberts, the Guardians trilogy, and it is Stars of Fortune. This book surprised me because I really didn't expect anything from it. I don't know what I was thinking when I went into this book, but I had this entire trilogy on my list, on my shelves for so long, and I almost unhauled it so many different times because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to read it. It doesn't really sound interesting. I mean, it does, but it doesn't sound interesting. Like, I don't really know. And so the August edition, the fall equinox of the Magical Readathon, I needed a book with like a coastal setting, and I couldn't think of one that I really wanted to read, and this one had that. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a chance. And it blew me out of the water. It follows 6 strangers, and they are all searching for this fallen star. It's contemporarily set, but there's magical, it's a fantasy book underlying everything. So these 6 strangers come together for one reason or another, and they're all searching for this star. And so each book follows the search for a different star, as well as a different couple within this group of 6. All the people who are in this group are there for a specific reason. They all have secrets that they're hiding that come out throughout the book, so you figure out why they're searching for the star and what makes them a little bit different, and it's just fantastic. And I don't really know what to tell you, because like, the writing itself, there's nothing amazing about it. It honestly feels like a very detached writing style, as far as like you as the reader are a little detached from the plot, which usually doesn't work for me, but I don't know what it was about this one specifically, but it did. It worked so well. I read this in like 2 days, I want to say. Like, I almost read it in one sitting. It was so good. I could not put it down. So I can't wait to dive into the rest of the series. I don't know if it's Nora Roberts' writing style or if it's just this series itself really drew my attention, but I'm very interested to read other things by this author because she has a ridiculous backlog of books. But I was so shocked when I read this. The next one is the first volume of Descender, and this is by Jeff Lemire and Dustin McGuinn. This one I read for I think it was my most recent BookTube Made Me episode that I did for that series I'm doing, where I read books that I picked up because of G from Book Roast. She loves this series, and I love things like Saga and the Illuminate Files and the Themis Files, like all those series I picked up because of her. So I don't really know what I was expecting going into this one, but I was a little hesitant because I feel like I haven't had the best luck with some things sci-fi wise lately. Like, sci-fi is not my go-to, let's say. So this one, I'm still to this day not quite sure if I can put my finger on what it is that I love about this book so much, or the series so much. It basically follows this young robot right here, and in this world there was a huge robot. Uprising is not the right word, but there's these giant robots that just showed up one day, and started destroying things and then disappeared. And so everyone's been very on edge. I think it's been about 10 years since then, and everyone's very on edge. There are groups that like robots, there are groups that hate the robots, there are people who like just kind of in between. And so this little robot here was created in a line of what's called Tims, and they're basically companion bots, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You are hired or you buy this robot to be a companion for someone. And this one follows Tim 21, and he was a companion for a young boy on this like moon planet, and he has been asleep for 10 years ever since the robot, I keep wanting to say uprising, but that's not right, but he's been asleep for a while. And he wakes up and everyone's dead and it's just him, and people are out to get him because his code matches the code of these giant bots. And so it's a ragtag group of people, which you can kind of see here, who come to get him, that are there to help him out. And there are other people who are out there to get him. And this one, I've read the first 3. There are 6 in the series. I've read the first 3 so far, and I really want to continue because I've very much enjoyed this. I don't know what it is. There's nothing spectacular about this as far as like the plot stood out or the characters stood out or anything that like really stood out in my brain, but I had a blast reading this book, and it was so surprising because I really didn't know what to expect from it. It could have been great, it could have been terrible. Like it could have been either or, and it ended up being fantastic. And it really does give me the vibes of Saga, and I think it's just that sci-fi-ness of it. But I loved the ragtag group of friends, and each volume ends with like a humongous cliffhanger of sorts, so they really know how to get you, and the plot just kind of continues from this one. But I adored this one so much. It was so much fun to dive into. I just don't read as many graphic novels as I used to, and I didn't used to read a whole lot anyway. So to have another one to dive into was so much fun, and to have a completed one, which is great. So yeah, that one surprised me by how much I just fell head over heels for these characters, especially Tim. He's my favorite. He's adorable. I will do anything to protect him. The next one is A Beautiful Bastard, and this is by Christina Lauren. This is the first in the Beautiful Bastard series. This one I have on here as a surprise because I didn't know what to expect for this one either. I'd heard mixed things about this one. I'd heard that this may not be their best work. It was one of their earlier books together, and it's a series that a lot of people kind of brush off because their stuff here recently has been more in the vein of like rom-com, and this is more in the vein of office smut. So a lot of people have written it off, and so I wasn't sure what to expect, but I loved every second of it. The romance was spectacular. I don't know if you can see how much I tabbed this book, but it's a lot, and it's for sure smutty. It's an office romance, or it's an office smut book. That's basically what it is. It's this girl and this guy who's technically, I mean, he's kind of her boss. He's not really her boss. It's this company, and it's the family that runs this company. And so he used to be over in London, and he came to America, and she was assigned as his assistant. And she's been with the company forever. She's just trying to get her degree. She needs an internship for her, I don't remember what she's getting a degree in, but she needs an internship, and this is her internship. And so she and him have always been at each other's throats, and it just spirals out of control with this one, and it turns into some very interesting scenes between the two of them. So I don't know why I expected this to be terrible, but I really went in thinking it wasn't going to be very good, and it surprised me so much. It's exactly perfect for people who like the hating game. It has those same vibes, and I just thought it was fantastic. So I want to continue reading the series because I know there's going to be more good things. I do have the second one, which was gifted to me by my lovely friend Teresa. So I need to pick that one up. I just haven't yet. But yeah, this one surprised me so much. The next one that surprised me is A Daughter of the Trolls, and this is by Mackenzie Catron. This is a book that I've actually been following this author for a long time. She is a makeup artist and does a lot of like full body makeup. online with a bunch of different brands, and it's just fascinating to see. But this is her very first book, and I was part of the group that got ARCs for it, and I'm very grateful for that. I actually still have my paperback ARC over there, but I had to get a hardcover because it was just so beautiful. And this book is a YA fantasy that's part of a new series. This is so dark in here all of a sudden. Do you see this? This follows our main character, Sparrow, and she has been living in a wheelchair basically her entire life. She has a heart condition that makes moving around really difficult, so she stays in a wheelchair. And they live in this glade, which is basically a place where all of these magical creatures, gnomes, what is even here? A bunch of stuff. I'm trying to see if it'll tell me. Trolls, imps, gnomes, and fairies all live here, and they call it home. And so something happens, and this boogeyman type character called Black Annis comes in and destroys a bunch of stuff, and her mom goes missing. And so she's like, oh no, I need to go do some things. And so she ends up going on this adventure with her friend Rush, who's a half goblin. I don't know if he's what the other half of him is, but he's half goblin. And he and her go on this adventure, and it's basically her traveling through the woods in a wheelchair and how that works. And it's fascinating because the author herself lives in a wheelchair, and is very similar, from what I can understand based on what she said on social media, that it's very similar to Sparrow, and how it's just she's very weak and it's hard to move around sometimes. I was interested to see for lots of reasons. It's a YA book, so I wasn't sure. I was a little hesitant because I wasn't sure how I was going to feel going into a YA book, especially with this year not being the best for YA with me personally. I just have not been wanting to drift towards it, and then when I have, it hasn't been interesting. So I was not sure what to expect with this one, and it blew me away. I have a full review. I'll leave it down below if you would like to check it out. But I adored this book. I highly recommend it for any fantasy lover. It's based on mythology, but it incorporates it so well that, like, if you know, you know, but if you don't, you're not missing it. And I just adored it. Clearly, I now have 2 copies of it, and I can't wait to see other things by this author because her storytelling is so fantastic. But it really was that YA-ness, as well as I read this physically, and usually when I read books physically, it takes me 10,000 years, and I flew through this in like a weekend. It was incredible. The next one is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the first in this series. I have the first 3 in these beautiful Fairly editions. I will never not take a moment to show you how stunning these editions are. I had heard good things about this series, but I wasn't really sure what to expect. It was a high fantasy, and sometimes high fantasies don't work with me. It just kind of depends on the situation. I think this is also considered new adult, but now that I'm thinking about it, there's definitely a couple scenes near the end that are adult, so maybe it's new adult somewhere in there. And we follow our main character, Poppy, and she is a maiden, or the maiden, and she basically is going to be given to the gods. She doesn't really know what that means, but it means that she can't be touched, she can't be looked upon, she wears white, her face is covered, she can't experience pleasure, she can't experience certain types of emotions, she has to be like the purest of the pure. And so the book really starts when she gets a new bodyguard named Hawk, and he helps her question some stuff, and it spirals from there. I still have not finished or continued with the series, even though the cliffhanger on this was, oh my gosh, so good. But there was something about the writing. I don't think there was anything particularly incredible about the characters. I mean, they were fascinating, don't get me wrong, but the writing hooked me within the first, like, chapter. Like, I remember doing a vlog for this, because I read this in August for, I think it was August, or maybe it was April. I remember reading it for one of the magical readathons that I was doing, and just, like, doing an update randomly in the car, because I was so obsessed with this book, and I just needed everyone to know that I was obsessed with this book. And I was only like, I was less than 50 pages into it. So the characters are fascinating. I liked the world. There is a magical system within this book, but no one really talks about it because it's considered a big spoiler, and I would consider parts of it a spoiler, but not other parts of it. So I'm still not going to say anything, but just be warned. I just thought it was fantastic. I just head over heels fell in love with these characters, and 5 stars. It became one of my favorites for a very, very long time. I still think very, very highly of it, and I want to continue because, again, huge cliffhanger at the end, and I still haven't continued. That's a rant for another day. I loved it. 5 stars. Oh, well, all of these are 5 stars. That's pretty obvious. But this one sucked me in. All right, the next one is probably one of the biggest surprises for me, and that was The Other Boleyn Girl, and this is by Philippa Gregory. The reason this is such a surprise is because I watched this movie. This has been turned into a movie. I watched this movie a long time ago, so I knew the story. I knew the idea behind this book. I hadn't read a Philippa Gregory book in a while, and I forget, when I take breaks, I forget how much I enjoy them until I come back to them, and this one was fascinating because you just have to remember that, like, the movie only shows you so much. So this book follows Mary Boleyn, who is the sister of Anne Boleyn, who eventually becomes the Queen of England. And the movie really focuses on Anne as a character. I mean, it follows both of them, but it really does focus on Anne. Whereas this one, it's all in Mary's perspective, and while it does end up focusing on Anne for some parts of it, it's because Mary's life is about Anne at some points. And I just thought it was fascinating watching this young girl watch this king go through all of these things and really see the inner workings of Anne's relationship with him. Now, granted, it is fiction. Philippa Gregory is actually a historian, so she tries to incorporate as much nonfiction and historical elements as she can, but there is some fictionalize it, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean, like she does dramatize some stuff and make some stuff up, so not all of it is going to be exactly accurate, but it is fascinating to think about Anne as a character and see what she was like and what her sister saw her as, and just that relationship, and you really watch Mary go through the ringer for her sister. So I wasn't really expecting anything. I honestly had been putting off reading this book for a long time because it's super thick, and again, I'd just watched the movie, so I wasn't expecting too much from it, but it ended up being amazing to the point of I immediately went into a second book by Philippa Gregory right afterwards, and her books are dense, so I loved it. And the last book I want to talk to you about is kind of representative of an entire series, but this is the one that started it all, and that is Pride and Prejudice and Other Flavors by Somali Dev. So this is the first in a series that follows the Rajay family, and it is a family of like upper elite, the rich of the rich of Indian Americans, and each book follows a story. It's inspired by a Jane Austen novel. This one obviously is Pride and Prejudice, and in 1 week I read this one, became utterly obsessed, read the second one, which I owned, became utterly obsessed, and went out and bought the third one and read them all within a week. So her writing captivated me. The idea behind these stories captivated me. They all have real life conversations. There's something else that the author is tackling along with the just romance narrative, and you really see these characters, like they have the warm fuzzy feelings, but there is deep conversations within these books. So check out trigger warnings for all of them, because there are for sure trigger warnings within all of these, and I just loved it. It just took my heart and soul, and I didn't expect it to do so, because again, I read 3 books back to back to back in the same series. I binged a series, and I do not binge series, so it was so good. So that's it. Those are the books that really surprised me this year. Like I said, I could have continued talking. I could have had so many more, but these are like the top of the top. I just took my breath away. So I hope that you guys enjoyed. Please let me know, as always, if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, or if you have a book or two that just like surprised you so much when you were reading it this year. I would love to know. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media as well as other bookish links, so don't forget to check all of that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!